In this video, I'm going to talk about how can you make your job interview more memorable. So the idea is that you create a positive, a strong impression to your interviewer in a bid that you will significantly differentiate yourself from other candidates and have a successful outcome. Now, let me just say that one of the easiest ways to make your job interview memorable would be with a monumental mistake. So we of course want to avoid this. I won't be focusing on things such as building rapport with your interviewer or even your candidate brand as a whole, buying an HD webcam or being careful with your clothing, because in my experience, these things have rarely made any significant difference. Instead, I'll be focusing on three areas which I was able to correlate with better interview outcomes. And the first thing I'd like to talk about here would be they want to hear something interesting about you, right? So the problem is this. Going through thousands of your stories, I noticed that in many cases your stories are not interesting, so they don't even contain the slightest trace of drama in them. Maybe if I give some counterexamples here of what I found interesting over time, and some examples which stuck with me over time, could be as little as a fix you did. For example, a guy was having a latency problem with a server which was 6 times higher than they were expecting it to be for a server located in Australia. And the problem turned out to be that the server, instead of located in Australia, AUS, was located in AU, that is in Austria, in Europe, which was the reason for the latency to be 6 times higher than they expected it to be. Or if you want an invention, a slightly funny one, someone built up some AI which could spot potholes on the road using cameras mounted on garbage trucks in Seattle. Right, so these examples happened many years ago, but still for some reason they stuck with me. So this is the type of example that you would want to focus on if you can in your interview. Or another idea here to make your answers more interesting would be if you can teach your interviewer something. So for example, I could teach you how to start a YouTube channel, right? So this could be something you'd consider as cool, right? So it would stick with you. So long story short, the first thing was try to make your answers, your stories interesting, right? So your job interview is more memorable. The second thing I like to focus around here would be your stories, your answers must score well on clarity of thought, right? So I was, in my experience, people who can not necessarily articulate, but rather explain things, explain concepts with just a few words, with just a few keywords, regardless of their English-speaking skills, tend to do significantly better in these job interviews. And therefore, focusing on clarity of thought is I believe it's a super useful exercise for you for the purpose of a job interview. And what can you do to score better on things such as clarity of thought? Well, you could prepare these answers in advance, all right? Building a story bank if you want. Or I've even encountered people applying for director level roles which kept their entire stories on their computer screens right behind the camera, and they were even able to read those answers during a role play session, right? So this is in order because they wanted to ensure that they communicate their answer as convincingly and as clearly as possible, right? So clarity of thought would be another one you'd want to focus on. And again, solutions exist to the extent you would want to invest into this, and to the extent you feel like this could be something you could as well benefit from, right? And the third thing I like to talk about here, which I find it also could make a significant difference to make your job interview more memorable, would be questions for them, right? So in almost any job interview, towards the end of it, usually you will get asked, hey, do you have any questions for me? And in many cases, candidates do prepare some questions for them, but the problem with this, those questions are quite generic and boring, right? So there is to benefit from when choosing what questions you should ask your interviewers. And to give a number of examples here, there are some people who you're going to interview with who are not the main stakeholders in this process. They would very much prefer taking their notes and move on. These type of people could very well appreciate some easy questions, such as what do you like best about your role, right? Or on the contrary, there are some interviewers who are some tougher ones, such as the bar raiser, right, who would probably prefer slightly more uncomfortable interview questions. What do you like least about working here and stuff like that. And the third scenario, and probably the most efficient, actually surely the most efficient of all, if you want your answers to be memorable, would be to follow up with a question around the deep dive, which you did during the actual conversation, right? So if, for example, you were grilled about the number of sales you've closed in your previous role, you could also ask them, hey, what would be an acceptable sales target for the company that you're applying for? Or similarly, if you're being grilled about some latency problem in some system, that what would be an acceptable latency if I get the job in your company, right? Or if you have any specific process that you're being screened on, they ask you to talk about the process in your existing company. You say, hey, but what about your existing company? How would this process look like if I get the job, right? So long story short, try to come up with something unique as a follow-up, as a questions for them, right? Because this is towards the end of the interview, and you will increase your chances to make your job interview more memorable, right? So something interesting about yourself, try to make your stories more interesting, and it could be easily achieved using drama in many of your examples. Clarity of thought and questions for them should be tailored to the interviewer that you're talking to. So, and of course the interview that you're getting into. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.